Hello, everyone, and welcome to our eCornell keynote panel titled Building a Clean Energy Economy, the Inflation Reduction Act and Workforce Development. My name is Zach Cunningham, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's session. We have many wonderful experts from government, organized labor, and workforce development joining us today to discuss how we can implement the Inflation Reduction Act in a way that addresses the climate crisis at the scale science demands, while creating access to high-quality jobs and training opportunities. This event is being recorded and will be available after it concludes, and we hope to take some questions from the audience as time allows, so please enter your questions into the chat feature. I'm a labor educator with the newly formed Climate Jobs Institute at Cornell's School of Industrial and Labor Relations, or ILR School. Our institute's mission is to guide New York's and the nation's transition to a bold, equitable, and inclusive clean energy economy. We work with policymakers, the labor and environmental movements, industry leaders, and others to provide the information and resources they need to make this historic transition in a way that empowers working people, creates high-quality jobs, and confronts race and gender inequality. This panel is the Climate Jobs Institute's first public event, and we are so happy that you are able to join us. On August 16th, 2022, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. It's a massive bill that touches nearly every corner of the economy. But in today's session, we're really going to dig into the key climate and labor provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. Some analysts have called the IRA the most expansive climate bill in U.S. history, as it pours hundreds of billions of dollars into clean energy generation, energy efficiency efforts, and other measures. And by some estimates, the bill could reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by up to 40% compared to 2005 levels. Meeting these ambitious climate goals will require millions of workers to take on jobs in new and existing industries, and the IRA explicitly links climate action to high-quality job creation. Through prevailing wage and apprenticeship utilization requirements, environmental justice measures, and various equity provisions, the IRA has the potential to expand family and community-sustaining jobs in key climate sectors, fund high-quality training opportunities tied to that work, and ensure equitable access to jobs and training for women, communities of color, frontline and tribal communities, displaced energy workers, and others. So in the next hour, we're going to discuss how best to implement provisions of the IRA to maximize its climate mitigation and economic development potential. And specifically, we're going to focus on workforce development provisions like apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. We hope the panel provides important information for legislators, government officials, workforce development professionals, and workers' rights advocates on how the IRA can be used to build high-quality training opportunities, community-sustaining jobs, and benefits to the climate. Like I said, joining us today is an excellent group of folks with broad expertise from the government, both federal and state, the labor movement, and the workforce development world. So I'd like to briefly introduce everyone before we get started. First, Bettany Jones is going to set the context for our conversation by outlining the key climate, labor, and workforce development provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. Bettany is the Director of Energy Jobs at the U.S. Department of Energy, and she has more than 20 years of experience working on policies that lie at the intersection of climate and labor. Then we'll dive into a discussion with our four amazing panelists. Leonard Aguilar is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Texas AFL-CIO and a member of the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, Local 142 in San Antonio. He serves as a board member for the Workforce Capital Area, which is a workforce development organization in Travis County, Texas. And he also played an important role in establishing the labor-led Texas Climate Jobs Project Coalition. Kathleen Colhane is president of Non-Traditional Employment for Women, or NEW, which is an apprenticeship readiness program in New York City that aims to increase opportunities for women to enter registered apprenticeship programs and careers in the building and construction trades. Dawn Oyer is a senator from Rhode Island's District 13. She chairs the Rhode Island Senate Committee on Environment and Agriculture, and she was also the lead sponsor of 2021's Act on Climate and 2022's Affordable Clean Energy Security Act. Senator Oyer also helped found the Climate Jobs Rhode Island Coalition in 2020. Last, but certainly not least, Teresa Acuna is the Deputy Director for the Good Jobs Initiative and a Senior Policy Advisor with the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. For years, Teresa has worked to create good jobs in the green economy as a staff member of the California State Legislature and the U.S. House of Representatives. Just as a reminder, towards the end of the session, we will try to answer as many of your questions as we can, so please enter them into the chat feature. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Bethany Jones to tell us more about the Inflation Reduction Act.
Great, thank you, Zach, and thanks for having me here to speak today and kick things off. I'm Bethany Jones. I'm the Director of the Office of Energy Jobs at the U.S. Department of Energy. And our office is focused on supporting job quality and equitable job access in the energy sector. So we're focused on creating jobs with high wages, strong worker protections, and the freedom for workers to organize for the purposes of collective bargaining. So we want these jobs, these energy jobs, to be attractive and accessible to all workers, particularly those who've been long excluded from secure career track employment. Our office works across the DOE complex and with other federal agencies to meet these goals and ensure that this transition to a low carbon economy, a zero emissions economy, creates meaningful job opportunities. I think this is such an incredible moment to be in this line of work. The commitment of the Biden-Harris administration to climate change, equity, and creating good union jobs has led to some historic investments. We have the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act. These are historic investments that are poised to invest more than $500 billion in the clean energy economy over the next decade. This is the biggest climate investment in U.S. history. It's probably the most significant investment in climate that in the world. Very few people know about it, and it's remarkable. Some of the labor standards and considerations will ensure that the deployment of this investment should create good union jobs and broadly shared prosperity across the U.S. Those things are really critical priorities for DOE and for the Biden administration. And just to give you a couple indicators of early success, we've tracked nearly $100 billion in private sector investment in the battery supply chain. So that's this federal money, these public investments are really spurring orders of magnitude more from the private sector to really reshore some of these industries and build them in a way that's uniquely to tap into the U.S. sort of unique competitive advantage. So we're seeing growth in manufacturing, engineering, and related occupations as we're rebuilding U.S. supply chains for the energy, clean energy transition, but also other industries. We, in December, announced a $2.5 billion loan to one battery cell company called Altium, which is a joint venture between General Motors and LG Energy Solutions. They have a few sites, and their site in Ohio, workers voted overwhelmingly in December to be represented by United Auto Workers. So as we're seeing these investments unfold, we're seeing early evidence that these jobs will, in fact, be unionized, that there's strong organizing momentum to carry this wave forward. Our data shows that clean energy jobs are growing across the country. There's energy efficiency jobs in nearly every county in the U.S., solar jobs in 85% of U.S. counties. And certainly with the Inflation Reduction Act, the incentives for more development will scale that rather significantly. We also know that the social considerations of these projects, engaging with community, engaging with labor, are really important to the successful transition. And I'll talk a little bit in a minute about how DOE is trying to encourage that engagement and accountability to workers in the community, because we might just not get there without broad support that we need to make sure that these investments actually happen. But a lot of these jobs, and we've seen this in the data historically, a lot of clean energy jobs don't require four-year professional degrees. They're apprenticeable occupations. And so one of the things in the Inflation Reduction Act that's really exciting is that developers, taxpayers can tap into 5 times the credit, the tax credit, if they pay prevailing wage, if they utilize registered apprentices. And so that's an incentive to really start getting the workforce development activities to train the next generation of workers by engaging apprentices on the jobs. And that's a different approach than 15 years ago during the ARA period, where we were putting training up front and hoping that workers found jobs. This time around, we're creating the jobs and supporting the training as that work gets implemented. So we're really excited to see and support that demand-driven approach to workforce development. One of the areas in which we're investing in that outside of construction is through our Battery Workforce Initiative. And this is a sectoral approach to workforce development for the manufacturing industry and battery supply chain specifically, where we're working in partnership with Department of Labor to bring together employers across the battery industry, labor, and subject matter experts to develop a coherent system of workforce development and document training standards that are going to be required to support the rapid growth of that industry. We're also supporting DOL's Good Jobs Initiative, which I'm sure Teresa will talk more about. Their leadership and subject matter expertise has been invaluable to the Department of Energy and other departments as we really think about how to implement this vision. It's great to say we want to create good union jobs. How do we actually get that done? What are the labor standards that need to get baked in to our funding agreements? And what is the accountability process and everything else to make sure that that vision and hope becomes a reality? So Department of Labor has been very helpful in working with us on that. One of the things that we have leaned into is for our competitive funding, assigning 20% of the points of an application to what we're calling a community benefits plan. So applicants who are seeking DOE money for clean energy projects have to tell us how they're going to do 4 things. How are they going to meet the Justice 40 initiative, ensuring that 40% of benefits of the project flow to disadvantaged communities? How will they further diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals of the administration? How specifically will they create good paying jobs where workers have a free and fair chance to join a union, where workplace health and safety is front and center, and other labor standards? And this is potentially the most important, how will they ensure meaningful engagement and accountability to the community and labor partners? These goals that we're trying to bake in, they're not just nice to haves. They're not even just policy goals. They're that, and that's important. But we really think that these principles are essential for project success. We are not going to build the political and social will for more of these investments, or even to implement the funding that's already committed, unless we are able to demonstrate broadly shared prosperity, unless we're able to demonstrate the creation of good union jobs, unless we're able to demonstrate new and more inclusive access to those jobs. So these principles are nice to have, but they also reduce the risk of implementing clean energy projects. And that's really important. We really think if we do this, if we deliver, if we implement in the way that creates broadly shared prosperity, these won't be once in a generation investments. They shouldn't be once in a generation investments. If we're successful that in creating the broadly shared prosperity, we'll be building that political and social will for more such investments. Good union jobs are the linchpin of sustained and bold climate action in this country. It's the way that we will win. It's the way that we will address the climate crisis. And we really, at DOE, we really look forward. We really appreciate working with partners inside government, outside government, and I look forward to continuing to work with you all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bethany, for that outline of the different opportunities as well as the standards and investments involved from the federal level. And now that we have that important context set, I want to dive in and talk with our panelists. So the first few questions here are going to focus specifically on IRA implementation, and then we're going to shift to more specific questions about workforce development provisions of the Act. So my first question I'm going to direct to Teresa Acuna from the Department of Labor. So as Bethany just outlined, there's obviously great promise in this law for us to take steps towards tackling climate change, creating work opportunities, expanding access to high quality jobs for underrepresented communities. What needs to happen now and in the next few years for the IRA to really achieve its promise?
Thank you for that question, Zach. I'll start by saying that we have to work together as an ecosystem. And what I mean by that is in partnership of the federal government, state, local government, labor workers, and the private sector to center job quality and equity in the Inflation Reduction Act workforce development strategy. And at the federal government level, there was a tremendous opportunity to reimagine how we make jobs through this historic federal investment. And learning from other investments that we've made in prior years, we need to think of the ways IRA can have a sustainable impact on the American workforce. And to this end, the Department of Labor launched the Good Jobs Initiative, as Bethany had mentioned, to provide critical information to workers, employers, and government agencies as they work to improve job quality and create equitable access to good jobs. Providing, and this is done in three kind of main ways. One is providing easily accessible information to workers about their right to minimum and prevailing wages, overtime, safe and healthy workplaces, the right to form a union and bargain collectively with their employers and many others. Second, engaging employer stakeholders as partners in improving job quality and workforce pathways to good jobs. And the third bucket of what we spend a lot of our time is supporting partnerships across federal agencies and providing technical assistance on grants, contracts, and other investments designed to improve job quality. And so far, the Good Jobs Initiative has worked in collaboration with federal agency partners to incentivize equity and good jobs and over $66 billion of competitive grant funding. We've entered 3 MOUs with Department of Transportation, Commerce, and Energy, and we have more coming as they're relevant to IRA investments, where each agency details its commitment to using federal funds to support equitable workforce development pathways into good jobs. We've established shared good jobs principles with the Department of Commerce, identifying essential elements of a quality job. This is a shared vision of what constitutes a good job. And we think it's quite actually special that, oftentimes Department of Labor and Commerce may not be on the same side of things, but we came together really in earnest to describe and provide a framework of when we say good job, what does that mean? And of course, it's your traditional pay and benefits, but also flexibility and consistency in scheduling. It's supportive services. It's a voice for workers at their workplace and worker empowerment. And this is all inspired by what we have been hearing on the ground and what we know helps recruit, retain, and retain workers. And last but not least, the Good Jobs Initiative has engaged both small and large employers across the country to showcase how they are recruiting and retaining diverse workers by investing in training, higher wages, benefits, and respecting workers' right to organize and collectively bargain. So in summary, Zach, centering job quality and equity is a proven way to recruit, train, and retain the scale of workers that we'll need to fulfill the promise of the IRA. And incentivizing this in federal funding is one significant direction that we are moving in. And of course, we need to have partners on the ground to help execute this vision and really fulfill its promise. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And to build off of those really helpful comments, I'm going to go to Senator Oyer next. So a lot of the on-the-ground work to make IRA's promise become reality is going to happen at state and local levels. So as a state legislator, what do you see as the role of state officials in making sure that local governments, contractors, and others can really take full advantage of this legislation?
Thank you, Zach, for the question and for inviting me to join you all today. I think we have an important role. As you mentioned, state legislators and states and municipalities, we're on the front lines of actually executing and implementing these laws. And I think, I'm very proud to be a founding member of Climate Jobs Rhode Island. And I think bringing those voices to kind of build off of what Teresa was saying, building off those voices, the coalition, when I would talk to the labor groups and I would talk to the environmental groups, and they both saw the same future that Bethany was talking about. And these jobs are the potential to build that future. And so I think being able to kind of bring that vision to the state level in our state policy making, making sure that, when we are implementing these policies, that we're not just thinking about the climate impacts, we're also integrating the workforce impacts as well. That as we transition to a new economy, that we have jobs that are family sustaining jobs, family sustaining good jobs that are focused on equitable and diverse workforce recruitment. And that can be baked in and can and should be baked into the state policy that we're moving forward to help as we spend these federal dollars. I think as a baseline on the states, we need to have enforceable laws on the state level as well. I was the lead sponsor of the Act on Climate legislation in 2021 in Rhode Island, and that really set our framework. That was the foundation that we laid for the climate work that we're doing here in the state of Rhode Island. The goals that we have in that bill are mandatory enforceable through citizen lawsuits. So, individual citizens can sue the state if we're not achieving our goals. But quite honestly, that's kind of the level of accountability that we need to bring to our policies and make sure that we're moving forward. And similarly, passing bills that have benchmarks and goals that are very clearly stated, having renewable energy goals sends a signal to the marketplace and to the workforce that we are heading in this renewable energy direction. So Rhode Island has a renewable energy standard that we want to reach 100% renewable energy generation by 2033. And we also have goals around additional offshore wind development. So setting those targets to be really aggressive in this space, in this transition. And then I think finally, one thing that's really important is to make sure that we're working with the administration as well. So as a state legislator and other state legislators have, different relationships with the governor's office, but a lot of the funding, is going to come through the executive branch. And we need to make sure that the executive branch has an understanding of what those benchmarks and deadlines are, what grants are just directed grants and what grants are competitive grants, and make sure that we as a state have a plan in place to really go after those funds and make sure that we're able to fully execute that range of funding opportunities in each of our states.
Great. Thank you, Senator Oyer. And there's a question that came in from Kat in the audience that I think dovetails nicely with this. How do local municipalities navigate IRA opportunities? Is there a frequently asked questions one-pager or specific training for local agencies? I think, Teresa, maybe you might have some thoughts on that particular question.
We do. I encourage you to visit goodjobs.gov. That provides a lot of information of at least of like the framework of how we're looking at these investments from the federal side. So in thinking about how you want to be competitive and using job quality and equity as a lever, a competitive advantage, please take a look. We'll also be rolling out a Good Jobs toolkit in the coming weeks that can provide, again, a lot of this resources and tools as you're thinking about creating a local strategy of how you're going to create these jobs. We hope that you can tap into these resources as well.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn next to Leonard Aguilar from the Texas AFL-CIO. So Leonard, we heard from Senator Oyer about her work in Rhode Island. You come from a different political context in Texas. So despite its reputation as an oil and gas capital of the US, Texas really has seen an enormous amount of wind and solar energy development in recent years. And I know that union leaders in your state have built a robust climate jobs movement, pushing officials to invest in workers. But really, the industry, not only in Texas, but it remains largely non-union. And in your context, there's not always the most sympathetic elected leaders. So if you could just spell out for us, why are federal labor and workforce standards so important in a state like Texas? And also, what should people keep in mind about IRA implementation in your specific political context?
Great question, Zach. And first off, thank you. And thank you to everybody else on the panel. It's an honor to be here in this space with you and appreciate the opportunity. Texas is unique, like you said. We're in a different place with our elected leaders in the state of Texas. And they don't always have the workers' interests, as a priority. It's always about the corporations and the company. And hearing Bethany talk about prevailing wage and Teresa talk about prevailing wage as well, that's one of the things that jumped to the top of my notes here, is that even our governor is threatening to not accept or work with any of the federal funding that is available if any prevailing wage language is attached to it. So he's willing to put workers and put the citizens of the state of Texas where they are already boxed in low-end jobs. Texas is a leader in a lot of renewable energy right now as it is. A lot of people don't know that, but there is a lot of renewable energy that is being produced right now. And they are low-end jobs. And that's something that we need to change. And again, we are grateful to the administration. We are grateful to the Department of Energy and the Department of Labor and just all the allies across the space that are wanting to help lift the opportunities for us. But, having those opportunities and having the workers in Texas, they have the issues of experiencing dangerous working conditions, the low wages, the lack of benefits, lack of apprenticeship training. And, obviously a low union density here in the state is an issue that we have as well that we're working on trying to change, but also the rising income inequality and everything that the IRA is wanting to work on and wanting to do. Is great, but we just need to get to that next level. The talk has come about doing it, the legislation has been passed, and now we need to get to that next step, because those companies are going to continue to try to take advantage of those workers here in the state of Texas, and across the country. And the opportunities that are in front of us right now, we're at a now or never moment. If we can't get these things done at this time and at this point, it shouldn't be, somebody had said, it shouldn't be a once in a lifetime or once in a generation opportunity. And these things, these opportunities, they're the opportunities in front of us right now. We have the people in place. We have the administration in place. We have the friends in place. We have the workers in place. We just need to train that local workforce, like it was said, so we can train them to become that next generation. We have the resources here. It's just getting to that point of getting to that next step, because solar is the opportunity in solar, the opportunity in wind, the opportunity with the hydrogen work. Everything is out there, and the time is now, because if we don't do it now, then it will probably be never.
Great, thank you so much, Leonard, for speaking from your perspective on the ground in Texas. And we're going to shift gears a bit and start talking more specifically about workforce development. And I'm going to stick with you, Leonard, for the first question here. So one of the most notable workforce development provisions of IRA comes with the clean energy tax credits, specifically that the amount of a tax credit is about 5 times greater for those who agree to pay prevailing wages and use a certain amount of apprentices on the job. So Leonard, you come out of the building trades, you went through an apprenticeship program with the plumbers and pipe fitters. And recently, a very interesting article came across my computer from Lee Harris from the American Prospect, and she was examining solar installation workers in Texas. And a lot of the dynamics that she outlines, I think, are really true across the country. So basically, in this piece, she dug into a major workforce development debate in the renewable energy sector, looking at the difference between people who are trained as solar installers versus those who are trained in a more traditional apprenticeship program to become electricians. So if you could sort of talk about what is a registered apprenticeship program, why is it important to invest in them as opposed to more limited training programs that give a specific skill like solar installer as opposed to those broader skills as an electrician?
Yeah, it's security. For me personally, it's security to have that registered apprenticeship program and know that as an apprentice, for me, it was having that job and having that security of being able to have that job there, having those wages that were worked out before, having the benefits, the insurance and the retirement plan, but more specifically to security for the family. It for me is front and center for that. But to the apprenticeship side of things and how that works is it in being able to work with the contractors and come up with these apprenticeship programs that we have across a joint apprenticeship training committees or for whatever trade or craft that there is, to being able to come up with the standards that happen in these programs. If you train somebody just to do one task or one specific task, there's never going to be any room for growth or improvement. And that's why it's so important to utilize these apprenticeship training programs, because you're going to be trained over a 5-year period. In my case, it was a 5-year program. And as long as you took care of your work hours and your schooling and that earn while you learn model. As you are working during the day, getting the hands-on experience with the craft that you are doing, you're going to school in the evenings 2 nights a week. We did 2 nights a week for 3 hours a night. And that is something that we were able to get the hands-on experience, which then we were able to reinforce in the evenings with the school. And it is, you can't compare anything to that. Being able to get that training, being able to get that reinforcement and being taught by those journeymen that have come before you, and being able to learn that craft and have that pride in that trade that you are working in. It is important to have those apprentice programs in place. And as I wish, I know you're going to be talking about apprenticeship readiness programs coming up, but I wish those were around when I was coming up in the trade, because they are so valuable. And being able to, as a pre-apprentice when I first started, being able to come in and not know which end was up, basically, when you're walking on that job site. Now you have these programs that are in place to help those folks that are coming into the crafts. So, yes, sir.
Thank you. And that is a great segue to ask our question of Kathleen Colhane, who runs Non-Traditional Employment for Women, which is an apprenticeship readiness or pre-apprenticeship program in New York City. So Kathleen, Leonard talked about apprenticeship programs. You run a pre-apprenticeship. What is pre-apprenticeship, and what role do you see it playing in accomplishing the goals of the IRA, both in terms of workforce development and equity goals?
Yeah, thanks, Zach, and thanks for having me here today. It's really exciting to talk about, as Bethany said, the historic investments, the job creation, the chance to do some things differently this time around, and the opportunities that it provides for our communities. And so NEW is a pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship readiness program based in New York City. And we work with an apprenticeship readiness collective of apprenticeship readiness programs in the city and beyond. And so apprenticeship readiness programs do just that. They prepare folks for the opportunities that are provided through registered apprenticeships. They give folks an understanding of what the breadth is of those opportunities and provide some basic training as well in trades math, in health and safety, in hands-on skills. The women that go through our program start with a 45-pound compound bucket, learn how to lift and carry up and down the stairs, down the block, graduate 2 months later, being able to do that with a 63-pound compound bucket. And it's also the fact that our program and some others have direct entry to those registered apprenticeship programs, that key to success. And so we prepare folks to be electricians, operating engineers, painters, plumbers, laborers, et cetera. In addition to placement, follow them through the life of their apprenticeship. In addition to feeding into the registered apprenticeship programs, the legislation with the IRA, that it purposely targets labor and workforce development standards, the prevailing wage, the apprenticeship targets that we're talking about. It pairs climate action with the creation of good jobs and pathways into those jobs. At NEW, one of the things we're doing is continuing our work with NYSERDA to include sustainability and green construction into our core training programs, particularly providing students with access also to OSHA 30, SST, G-Pro, some training courses, and of course, graduate certificates that come with our direct entry into the New York City building trades registered apprenticeship programs. It gives our graduates the competitive resume edge when applying for apprenticeships, and the IRA ensures a larger, more diverse pool of skilled labor has access to good jobs, and that employees have the skills necessary to meet clean energy goals when it comes to pay, equity, and gender. The unions are leading the way.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. And a question came through the chat that I think directly relates to this conversation that you and Leonard have started us on. Can you discuss whether and how workforce training provisions in IRA can be used specifically to create links to career and technical education at the secondary and post-secondary level? And that came from Rachel. And this, Leonard and Kathleen, feel free to answer, but anybody else who has thoughts on this, please jump in.
Leonard, you want to take it?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that what's exciting about the provisions is that it allows for pre-apprenticeship programs, apprenticeship programs, secondary education. It allows for everyone to think about new ways to prepare folks for these careers. And it allows incentives for not just jobs, but real careers, really good jobs. And so what's exciting for me in my work in pre-apprenticeship for the last 15 years is seeing that this is a historic difference and seeing that it is creating the demand, creating not just jobs, but good jobs. And it's incentivizing not only employers, but the educational institutions and apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship to open their doors in new ways that will create opportunities, not just now, but in the future.
Great. And I'll say just from some work that I've done in my current position, I've come across some other programs like Construction Skills in New York that is a pre-apprenticeship program that works closely with high schools in New York City to try and bring people into the trades. And a program called City Build in San Francisco partners closely with City College of San Francisco, a community college. So those are a couple other ways as well that I think are definitely worth looking at and expanding. Mm-hmm. And with that, we are going to now turn and hear the voice in a pre-recorded video of someone who has gone through a pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship program. This is from Anthony Cooper. He is a member of Laborers Local 79 in New York City, and he's also a graduate of and a current instructor in Pathways to Apprenticeship, which is a pre-apprenticeship program that helps people from low-income communities, many of whom are justice involved, enter into apprenticeship programs and careers in the building trades. So we will play that video for you in just a moment.
Hey, good afternoon. My name's Anthony Cooper. From the Bronx. I'm a dad of 2 girls. I'm currently the lead instructor of P2A. I'm also an active Local 79 member. And I'm joining you today to share a little bit about my journey from pre-apprenticeship to union laborer, mentor, and even instructor. So I was a participant in the pre-apprenticeship program, Pathways to Apprenticeship, also known as P2A, in 2014. I came through the first cohort of the program. After 12 weeks, it was called the Navigator program at the time. And after 12 weeks of completing the program, I was placed as an apprentice in Laborers Local 79 in NYC. Some of the benefits of the union came with the pay. So as a first year apprentice, I started off with $21 an hour. That was the first time I've ever made that type of money in my life. And not only did I make $21 an hour, it came with benefits. So I had health insurance. I was getting money put into an annuity. And I was also getting money put to the side for a vacation check. I was able to take my family out the neighborhood that I grew up in. We moved into a decent, nice middle-class neighborhood. My daughter's in private school. I was able to provide for them, have great Christmases, and it's just been great. Another part of the union that I love is the protection that you get on the job and off the job. So on the job, you have someone called a shop steward. They're like the liaison between the union and the workers. So anytime you have a problem with the company, you can just go to the shop steward, and he's able to talk to the foreman, talk to the superintendents, and make sure things are in order, like pay. Sometimes you might go through harassment, might be some safety issues. You just know that someone has your back. And as an apprentice, not only did I get paid on the job training, I also got mentorship and in the classroom training. So you can go to the class anytime, sign up. You can take classes to receive different type of certifications that can get you to work in a hospital and also get you to work with the fire department. And all these classes are free. Something else that I like about the union was the people that you meet, right? So some of the people that I've met coming through actual P2A, right? So one of my close friends, he's a shop steward in Local 79. We came through the program through the first cohort together. And about 10 years later in 2001, he was able to put me on the job when I needed to get to work because he was a shop steward on the job. That was one of the best feelings in the world, knowing that your friend is able to put you in a position to get some money and provide for your family because they came through the program with you. Another close friend of mine is a woman. She came through another pre-apprenticeship program, new, and she's an organizer. And one of the things that she helps me with is when I bring the class down to picking lines to show them some of the different aspects of the union, she's able to provide in the field, on hands training and mentorship. So just like having these people accessible to me is just amazing. And we all came through these pre-apprenticeship programs. And it's just another cool thing is being the lead instructor now, I'm actually in position to give this opportunity to about 20 to 25 people a class. And if we're doing 4 to 5 classes a year, that's 100 to 125 people receiving life-changing opportunities where they can make up to $100,000 a year, including benefits, and provide for their families, buy homes, and just like excel. We have access to about 15 to 20 different unions, including steam fitters, iron workers, electricians, plumbers, operating engineers, carpenters, and laborers. It's just like an amazing feeling to give this opportunity because when I first heard about this program, no one knew about this program. So it's a wonderful feeling to finally see that eyes are being on this program, people are interested, people are signing up, and people are actually doing what's needed to be done to change their lives. And I'm just happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to Anthony for his contribution to this conversation. I think it's really important to lift up the stories of folks like Anthony of how they were able to, through important workforce development programs, to break into high quality union careers. And with that, I also just want to lift up a comment in the chat box from Kip, who said that in the 1970s, it took lots of organizing and lawsuits for women and people of color to break into careers, not only in the trades, but in some important manufacturing industries at the time as well. And Kip had asked how folks like him can help other people who are going through that same process now to break into these careers. And I think really educating folks about these pre-apprenticeship programs is one important way to do so. Next, I'm going to go back to Teresa. So Teresa, the federal government obviously believes that pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs can play a critical role in our workforce development system. In your opinion, how can government agencies and municipalities really work together with organized labor to tap into existing training networks, but also to expand those networks in order to meet the challenges of providing a well-trained climate and clean energy workforce?
I appreciate this question, Zach, because we will not be able to recruit and train workers at the scale that we need to if we're not working together, and to really tap into this worker community that have often been excluded in this sector. And this includes women and communities of color. So pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships are valuable tools for both workers and employers. And as Leonard had mentioned, for workers, it's an earn as you learn model, which is great for workers. And for employers, you get a skilled workforce very quickly. And so I want to, in thinking about how we can be working together, I want to take this concept one step further and discuss the ways that we can make these opportunities more attractive to prospective workers, and come together to think about supportive services as we're thinking about supportive services in pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships. So supportive services are a routine part of high quality workforce development programs, and evidence shows that they contribute to participants completing programs, which leads to better jobs. Apprentices who do not complete their apprenticeship are more likely to experience or report to have been experiencing financial difficulties, especially with being able to afford tools and clothing, housing, childcare, and transportation. So thinking about how local governments, also just the way that we're thinking about the federal funding and ways that we can be purposing some of this funding to support these supportive services is one significant step as we think about really opening the aperture of like who's going to be taking part of these pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeship programs. And I want to lift up one model that I learned of quite recently, and perhaps folks on this call might be familiar with, and it's Care That Works. It's a coalition based out of New England. And what they learned is that, and this is done through partnership of labor groups, what they learned that they were having difficulty recruiting specifically women to this particular trade. And in learning more, they knew that childcare was a big impediment. And let's not even think far removed of just like a practical issue was they can't find childcare that starts at the same time as their apprenticeship. So they have to report to work sometime between 5, 6 in the morning. Childcare facilities don't open till about 7 to 8 a.m. in the morning. So Care That Works helped not only provide the funding, but one step further in actually liaising with childcare providers in seeing how they can open up and really truly advocated for these workers in ways that, perhaps these workers don't know how to navigate these conversations or systems. So, thinking creatively from the perspective of government and how we can be working together with our labor partners is just one kind of obvious way that we can be doing this work together.
Great, thank you, Teresa. And Kathleen, I know with non-traditional employment for women, childcare is an issue that is at the front of all of your minds. So I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add to that particular anecdote that Teresa lifted up.
Thank you, Zach. Would love to. And thank you for Teresa for bringing up the importance of the supportive services and the wraparound services in general. It's something that NEW has done throughout our 45 years in terms of having a social service team, being very intentional about not just childcare, but housing and supports for transportation throughout our pre-apprenticeship program, but also helping with union dues and tools and all the things you mentioned. And childcare has been so important for us in terms of those early morning hours. And then when you're a first year apprentice, if you're offered the overtime, you take it. And so being able to, have childcare for the overtime hours as well. And so having that backup to the backup childcare before you start our pre-apprenticeship program and before you start an apprenticeship. And so what happened during this COVID time is childcare was lifted up in many ways, right? And the importance of childcare. And I know I felt it in terms of home on Zoom with my children. We all felt it in new ways, and we're still feeling it and seeing the repercussions of that. And so one thing that NEW is really excited is we're partnering with NABTU, the North American Building Trades Unions, to pilot a childcare program where we can get funding into the hands of some of our graduates who are particularly challenged with childcare, and many of them are. And it's the issues that Teresa talked about in terms of the early morning, the late hours, the needing it in your community, at least particularly in New York City. You could be on a job in one borough one day and on a job in another borough the next day. And so needing that childcare in the community you live in, and childcare that's quality.
Absolutely. And another challenge that Michael put into the chat box that I'd love to get folks' thoughts on is the IRA really invest in trying to advance apprenticeship as a training model. But in some places, there is a long waiting period for people to enter into registered apprenticeship programs. So do folks have any thoughts about, whether it's through IRA or other means, how can we address that particular issue and try to make sure that we're widening opportunities in apprenticeship for all the folks who are interested in it? Leonard, you unmuted. You ready? You want to take that one?
If I can, just really quick, I mean, a small piece if I can. I mean, the apprenticeship programs are great, but they're only as good, and they can only take in for the jobs that they can supply. And the jobs are the key piece to that. So having the jobs is key for these apprenticeship programs to be able to grow and get bigger. And that's going to be the key. Unfortunately, I mean, if there is a waiting list, or if there isn't enough space, because I mean, the one thing with the construction industry is, there's peaks and valleys. You work until the job is done, and then hopefully there is the next one. And what we have in front of us right now is just great opportunities across the board to have just a steady stream of work. And actually, we're going to be having a lot of peaks coming up with the work that's in front of us. So that is, to just give some context to why it might be difficult, is because there might not be enough jobs to go to at that time. So there aren't the openings in the program. It isn't an answer to how to get around it, but it's trying to give an idea of why it might be there.
Absolutely, and that's really important context. Does anybody else have anything on that question they'd like to add?
And I think, Zach, it also speaks to the importance of the pre-apprenticeship, the apprenticeship readiness program, in terms of reaching out to communities, and when folks are trying to get into opportunities in apprenticeship, to be connected with a pre-apprenticeship program. What we're able to provide is that training, and then that connection to related employment while you're waiting for the apprenticeship to open up, and then keep connected as the apprenticeship opens up. There's direct entry opportunities, and then support someone, and then slot them in when those opportunities open up. And Leonard's right, it is all about creating the jobs, and that's what's the exciting part of this time in our history.
Great. And we have just about 5 minutes left. We're not going to be able to get to every question that's come in the chat box, but if you have further questions, please enter them at this point. And I'm going to do our last question for the panel before we hopefully have some more time with audience questions. And this one goes to Senator Oyer. So as a state legislator, you know very well that passing a law and implementing a law are two very different things. So back to the question of implementation, what concerns do you have moving forward about the IRA implementation, especially related to job training and climate work, that you think we really need to pay specific attention to in the coming years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm actually going to piggyback off of an earlier question with one of my concerns, which is what you were talking about earlier with Leonard about that distinction between training somebody for a specific task versus training folks with a skill. And, you know, are we training solar installers or are we training electricians? And I think that to me is very key. And I definitely have seen proposals in unrelated sectors that have tried to frame themselves as apprenticeships or training programs that are just, you know, just don't get it, don't get what the meaning is of an apprenticeship. And so I think making sure that any of the job training is, you know, making sure that it's being done in a way that's union backed, that's coalition backed and partnered with, because then we know that it's going to have the quality, it's going to provide the workers with the security that Leonard was talking about, because it's going to give them transferable skills so that they can ride through those peaks and valleys in a transferable way as the job opportunities arise. They're not, I actually have a family member who's a spot welder on an assembly line, and she cannot find another job because she's trained very specifically on that part of the assembly line. And it's, you know, that is a travesty. And we should not be spending this level of federal funding to basically subsidize companies' training programs. We need to make sure that these are apprenticeships for our workers, and that's giving skills for people to succeed as they move forward in their careers.
Thank you so much, Senator Oyer. I think we have time for one additional question, and I'm going to turn to a question that Adam put in the chat box. So obviously one side of the coin is job creation in new industries, but then also there's understandable concern about folks who work in fossil fuel industries, utilities, about potential job loss that comes with a transition. So Adam had asked what sorts of programs, training or otherwise, might be effective to help individuals and communities whose industries might disappear or decrease in numbers and relevance in the upcoming years.
I'll take a shot. From DOL's perspective, you know, we specifically have a few competitive grant opportunities for jobs in this sector to retrain, reskill folks. I think that Bethany dropped off. I know that Department of Energy has put a lot of thought and energy into this, no pun intended, but has put a lot of thought into this as well.
Great. Any additional thoughts from other panelists? I will just add that I know there's provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act that do give enhanced tax credits for locating new industries in what are called energy communities, communities that have experienced the loss of, say, a coal plant or some other technology. So that's definitely something to keep our eyes on. And I think the continued involvement of organized labor in these conversations is only going to have positive benefits to make sure that the voices and concerns of working people in their communities are lifted up and are a major part of this conversation. With that, unfortunately, our time together is coming to a close. But I would just like to say thank you to all of our panelists and speakers for engaging in this really important conversation. I also want to give a major thanks to the wonderful crew at eCornell for making this panel run smoothly. We're still in the early days of implementing the Inflation Reduction Act, and we hope to hold future webinars and educational sessions on this topic, so please stay tuned. And also, please feel free to reach out to us. I know at the Climate Jobs Institute, we really want to be a resource for people who are wrestling with these questions around workforce development and climate on the ground. So one quick note, the new Cornell ILR Climate Jobs Institute is holding its launch event at the ILR Conference Center in New York City on January 25th. And I believe someone is going to drop a link for our website into the chat box for you all. If you happen to live in the New York City area or will be in the area, we hope to see you there, and you can find more details on our website. On behalf of Climate Jobs Institute, I want to say thank you to everyone who joined today, and we really look forward to continuing this conversation in the near future. Bye-bye.